Here we go. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Talking Shit podcast. I'm Constantine, and this
I'm
is
Martin.
today we're going to discuss the uh,
What
the
are,
sort
what
of
are we discussing today?
we're discussing the great and wonderful epic economy that China has built and how well it's doing.
That
How well
seems to be
communism. We're talking how well communism. We're going to discuss how great communism is today.
how glorious the glorious, wonderful Chinese economy is going to overtake America and ha ha ha. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, have you seen? What have you read this week? Because I've seen Evergrande. I think it is Evergreen, whatever it is.
There's a lot, dude, happening. Everything from a drop in imports from Germany, specifically, but it's not just Germany; it's the world as a whole, and that's because the manufacturing base has left China. We've got companies like Apple, Kmart. What else? What's the other one? Nike, they've all got moved to India, either completely moved or in the process of moving. And so now you've got more unemployed people in China, which means, more idle people with no money or not much of a, future to work towards. That's only going to lead to more unhappiness and frustration with the current economy, the current regime. But it's not just that; it's also, with a decline in economic activity, also comes a decline in the value of the yuan. And so this is
Yeah.
why in my business, which is import export, we're seeing ridiculous quotations for products. Because they can't buy the yuan is weaker now, so they can't afford the increasing prices of raw materials now. So it's clearly
Have
having
you
an
seen,
effect.
have you seen about the flooding in China as well?
I've heard about that. I don't know too much about it other than that it's obviously that's something that's
It's
affected the economy. So
massive. Apparently, it's yeah, sort of they've closed a whole bunch of or they've diverted the water because they're trying to salvage Beijing because Beijing must be saved.
yeah, of course.
So they diverted all the water as much as they can through their dams and things through other towns and villages which have gone under, and then they're suppressing it all. And then they're doing the usual Chinese thing of there was one video I was watching of someone standing there with a hose squirting water into the air with a rescue crew in front of them, and they were filming. They were doing a fake thing, filming it, saying, "Look how wonderful we are! We're saving these people." Whereas, meanwhile, like the real people were drowning. Yes,
It's like 20 feet
so
away, people are dying. It's like, hey, we're saving people.
we're going to be we're going to be shown to be saving people, so we'll do this, and we'll just let those people drown. But it
Yeah,
will look like
screaming people in the
and we'll just
background.
clamp down on all that footage of those people drowning and not let that get out, which is harder and harder in the day and age of where everyone's got a video phone and the
It's like a
internet.
Family Guy cartoon where it's like they're doing something and then the opposite is happening right after.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And
yeah,
I don't think that, yeah, as you say, I don't think that's going to help their manufacturing either. I think it's almost a perfect storm of incidents because there's this thing in China called Mandate of Heaven, which is if the gods don't want you ruling anymore, then you start getting floods and plagues and all that sort of stuff. And we're like, well, we've had the plague, we've had the floods, we've now got the economic collapse if that's coming. Evergrande has declared bankruptcy in America to try and protect their assets there. Apparently, so the big building company that kind of was the first sort of domino to fall, this sort of big building company that's been building these bullshit projects.
ghost cities
Uh,
is why there's so many ghost cities in China because they've just been
yeah,
building because to make money, and then they haven't been
yeah,
able to sell it.
economic activity. Yeah, it's building stuff, and
I
you make
think
money.
I think were they the thing though to find out is were they building those buildings because they thought there was going to be a growth in population? Because as far as I'm aware, the one child policy was enacted in 1983 and then ended in 2015. So why are you building all these? Sounds like to me it was just a
I,
Ponzi scheme to just build.
I think it was how China was doing their economy. So China, there's been this for the last sort of 20, 30 years, there's always been stuff coming out saying China's economy will overtake America. And I was reading, well, there are a couple of things that argue that China, because the only way you get numbers from China is from China, so you can't trust them. There's not much independent way of sort of verifying the numbers.
And even if there were independent ways, I can guarantee you the Chinese Communist Party would have some representative go there and say, yeah, you need to
It,
fix these numbers to represent the.
yeah, and there's this argument being made that basically for the last sort of 20, 30 years, China has been saying, oh, we will have 5% growth next year, and they make 5% growth by some miracle. Then we will have 6% growth the next year, and they get 6% growth because, if you're the Chinese guy that comes out and says, growth is only 2.5%, you get taken out the back and shot.
Yeah,
So
do you know what this reminds me
being
of? Enron. Enron was doing the exact same thing around the turn of the century,
bullshit.
and basically they were just bullshitting how much they were growing, and people just kept buying stock,
Yeah. And the
and then it
further
turned out
you
all
get
their
away
projects
from the
were all
truth and the reality
fucked.
of the situation, the more problems you get. So
Yeah, and on top of that, the other problem too with the economy, because I was reading an article, it's like, why isn't China fixing it? Well, because you know everybody's afraid to do anything because if they get screwed up, they get shot. So that's another problem you've got culturally in China, where it's just like, and it's the same. I experience this in my business, import export. It's the same. The problem that you have with dealing with Chinese is that they move slowly because everybody's more afraid of making a mistake than actually making something happen.
and
Because
it's
if you make a
always
mistake, you
shit.
get shot or you get put in prison.
Everything is shit because they don't
Yeah,
care. It's
yeah,
like the people, like the gutter oil stuff that we were talking about, I think the other week, where they're
yeah.
going into the rubbish bins in the gutter and they're getting oil that's being thrown out and they're reusing it. And you're just like, all that sort of stuff is this
Not
sort of
just the gutter
Chinese.
bins too. I've seen them
There's,
go into bins. Yeah.
yeah, there's also a Chinese saying of get through the day. I can't remember what it is in Chinese, but it's like get it through the day, or make it through the day, and it's this idea of actually that was a YouTube
Do what you
video, I
have to
think.
do to get through the day.
Yeah, they
Doesn't
were
forget.
comparing
It doesn't matter
China with
about morals or
Taiwan.
ethics. Yeah.
Yeah, they were comparing China with Taiwan, that if you go into Taiwan and you ask for help, you will find someone who points you in the right direction. If you go into China and you ask for help, where's the police station or something like that, people just point to get rid of you because it's just, I don't care. I want to get through the day. I just want to get through the day with as little interaction as possible and whatever. And I don't really care about my interactions with other people. So yeah, I think because stuff's
It's
coming
weird
out.
because I've sort of sometimes you see this cultural, not narrative, but like this idea that Chinese are polite and sort of there's this kind of like politeness and sort of like respect for other people in Chinese society, but like you don't really see that, and that's because, like you say, because that's in Taiwan they still have those traditions because they're traditional Chinese, whereas in China, mainland China, it's people have been because of the famines. I think it all goes back to the famines and the hardships that people have
I think
just
it
been
goes
like,
back.
oh, it doesn't pay to be nice, or it doesn't pay to be, and so you have this
I
like
think
ruthless kind of like race to the bottom, where it's just like you screw over anybody just to get ahead, or just like you say to get through the day. Unfortunately, so
And I think a lot of that actually goes back to authoritarianism itself. I mean, if
yeah,
you look at democracy, ultimately we have freedom. So if you want to start a business, you can. If you do that in China, someone comes along and shuts you down or puts one of the party state officials in it, or the only reason you've got a business is because you've been given this iron mine or whatever by the state, and they expect you to do it because you're a loyal party member type thing. So you don't have the skills and experience to do it. The notion of self-motivation or doing something yourself, like it doesn't happen in China, from what I understand. Not nowhere near the same it can here, where, as I said, if you want to start a business or do something, it takes a lot of effort and time, and sure, not everyone's successful, but you can at least give it a shot. Whereas in China, don't even bother trying because someone will take it away from you, or it's not going to happen anyway. Which is where, going back to your question of why were they doing these ghost cities, from what I understand, a lot of the Chinese economic activity was building. So if you're buying resources and building stuff, and these assets have value, quote unquote, because people wanting to buy them,
there's no demand.
then
Yeah,
you've got a booming economy because your asset value is increasing. You've got all these assets, all this stuff's happening. You're building these wonderful buildings that people are buying. The problem is now,
but
because
then over time, when no one's renting and buying, it's like, well, the property value is going down because no one
no
wants it.
one's renting them. No
Yeah,
one's renting them, and two, they're falling apart.
yeah, there's that
The
too.
number of videos of what they call Chinese tofu dreg buildings that are falling apart in China, where the side of the building just falls off. Or this building collapsed and killed the choir, the National Boys Choir, or something. There was some choir or something that died a couple of months ago. I think I remember reading, and I'm just like, okay, right, the girls' hockey team or something was on the roof, and the building collapsed because it was just garbage construction. when you've got that, and so you've got people who are buying, because people going back to the Evergreen, whatever that company is,
And
that was
also, there was a
collapsing.
bank that I think collapsed, a regional bank that collapsed at the same time that Evergrande started going
Yeah.
into bankruptcy too.
All the banks are also giving loans to these
Yeah,
companies. So the whole thing is this debt cycle of these companies go up, borrow $1 billion from the bank, start a $1 billion project, don't have enough money to finish it. They go out and they raise another $1 billion.
I'm
For the next
surprised the
project.
executives in these companies didn't just run off to Taiwan or something, because you'd think like,
I don't think we have.
yeah, because I was going to say, because I mean, if you're doing this, then clearly this is a Ponzi scheme. So like, I would think that your goal is to build them up, and then just get the hell out of Dodge. Because once you've got the money from the banks to the loan money, then oh well, you
The
don't
thing
care.
is, if you're doing a thing and it's making, like, if you borrow $1 billion from the bank and you start a building that kind of fails and doesn't really work, but you get another $1 billion to finish it, but now you've supposed to deliver $2 billion worth of projects. You got that second billion for promising something else, but you spent that money on the first project. If it keeps working, you keep doing it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's
and
right.
I can see a lot of people going, "Oh, we'll just keep doing it. We'll just keep doing it." And because it's a house of cards, you have to keep doing it, because you realize once you stop, that's when the wheels on the bus fall off, or the wheels fall off the bus, because it's when you stop that all of a sudden, yes, we haven't got enough money to finish that project. If we keep going, we can get more money coming in. If we've got more money coming in, we'll finish that other project. That'll be fine. We're still solvent. But if people stop putting money in, which is what happened last year, where a lot of the sort of Chinese people that were buying these places sight unseen were suddenly realizing that, oh, I can't move into my building, or my building is garbage, or I now can't sell it to anyone. They were buying it because of these prices increasing, and you made all these sort of millionaires in China, because they had these apartments that were garbage apartments, but because they bought it off the plan for 100,000 or whatever, and it's now worth 200 or 300,000, you now have that value being reduced, and now that person's got a bank loan. The banks are collapsing because the people are refusing to pay their mortgage repayments. The building companies are realizing they can't meet their repayments if they don't keep the Ponzi scheme going, and now the Ponzi scheme's falling apart. And you've now got the double whammy, or triple whammy actually, of then the flooding, which natural disasters don't help. And then
And plus, just by nature, China is a country that can't sustain itself. It needs to import things, water, fresh air. So it's not like it can sustain itself.
You've got manufacture. Like, I think I was reading something about even pork and bacon, things like that. They can't do it themselves. They've got to import, and even the coal. Apparently, they can't get to their coal reserves or something, which is why they import so much from Australia.
Because you got to remember, China, technically speaking, half the country is actually a desert, right? So the Gobi Desert. I know it's sort of like there's a certain point if you look at if you look at China on the map, geographical map, right? Most of the population of China lives along the coast, right? Between like Tianjin all the way down to Hong Kong, in that green area. That's where most people live, right? And that's not a very big landmass right there. You compare it to Russia, it's nothing. And then the rest of the country is like desert or half desert or barren. So it's like really only half the country, or a third of the country can be used, or can be used for farming, or can sustain. And it can't sustain a billion people. Well, maybe if you use the whole country.
Well, this is the thing. The problem is they build it on bullshit. So there was this thing in the Great Famine or whatever it was back in the 1950s, where I think it was Mao who, of course, being authoritarian, wanted to have so much grain or whatever for all the people. And if you reported that, no, we don't have that much grain, well, then you got shot, sort of thing, and your farm was taken off of you and your land was given to someone else. But if, yes, we have 10,000 tons of grain, just don't open the granary and have a look, because there's nothing in there. So people were over-reporting what they'd produced. That all went up to the top, and, we have all this excess grain. So they gave a bunch of grain, I think, to Japan or something, like some other country or something, something like that with it.
And then they realize, oh crap, we don't actually.
And then we got no food for ourselves, and then like everybody starves. And this is the thing. It's like, again, I think the core issue goes back to the authoritarian regime, where you've got this fear, and so people lie and bullshit. And once they start lying and bullshit, you've got now can't rely on the numbers you get unless you're going around.
As soon as you start that trend, you create a cult. You gradually nurture a culture that decade after decade just continues that cycle.
Buy bullshit and steal. And actually, one of the good examples I want to give on that is, apparently, if you're a Westerner and you're in China, or you want to go see a Western movie in China, so you want to go see the Avengers.
Yeah, you have to see the government approved version of it.
Yeah, no. What
Well, I
apparently
think I've
happens
heard
is
that, but
you go
anyway.
in, they give you a ticket to the Chinese propaganda film that's just been released, and you're like, oh, but I wanted to see the Avengers film. They said, yeah, that's fine. Just go into that cinema there,
Yeah.
and you go in the cinema and you see the Avengers film, but your ticket says, Chinese propaganda film. Glory to Great China, whatever the latest propaganda film is.
Yeah.
And of course, what they're doing is they're lying because they want the numbers of how the movie cinema gets a phone call. How many
Oh, yeah,
tickets
yeah,
have
I
you
get you.
sold to the
Yeah.
great propaganda film? And you don't want to say, oh, nah, nobody wants to see that. Everyone's seeing Avengers. Like, you're going to get shot. Something bad's going to happen. But
That's
if you say,
interesting.
oh,
So instead of that's
wonderful.
kind of smart, right? Because in the Soviet times, that movie wouldn't have even made it into the made it through the border, right? That stuff would have been
Hmm.
like you'd be watching Western films, like I don't know during the late Soviet, sort of like the '70s, sort of last 10 or 2, last
They
decade or
banned
two.
Western films, didn't they?
Yeah, Western movie, like people were still importing Western things into the Soviet Union, right? So there was this
Hmm.
massive underground. Actually, it's quite fascinating. But there was a massive underground of like Western, like music, vinyls that and tapes that were being
Yeah.
smuggled in, and there was this massive underground sort of culture of people in the Soviet Union who were listening to Western music and dancing to Western music, and there was all underground. Whereas the Chinese have said, "Yeah, we'll let it in, but we'll just like trick you
Some of it
into
in,
playing
yeah.
mind games into thinking that you're
Yeah.
watching."
Well,
Sorry, go
this is
ahead.
the thing.
I was just, but it's just interesting.
No, but
Yeah,
this is the thing. Like, like getting a job at a movie cinema is one of the, it's like a college kid,
yeah,
high school student sort of job, after hours job type thing, right? So it's one of the most basic, low entry, no skill jobs you can get. So the first thing you do is you get this job, and what are you learning? You're learning to lie and bullshit. You're learning that the state official has called and asked, and you're just giving him bullshit. And if the thing is, this is the thing, that the people are smarter than the government, because the government thinks, oh, the people are wonderful and glorious, and think our regime is wonderful and glorious. The people know the regime's full of shit because they know. I work at the movie cinema and we tell bullshit to the state and they believe it. If we're
yeah,
doing bullshit and I'm reading in the newspaper about how great that film was, and I know categorically nobody fucking saw it, and that's all bullshit, then how much of the rest of this is bullshit? All of it's built on bullshit. Everything's
yeah.
bullshit. So why not just bullshit too? And then again, get through the day, just lie, cheat, bullshit. Who cares? It's all
Yeah.
bullshit anyway. And then again, you get to eventually, I mean, you can bullshit for a while, but
Yeah, what's the saying? You can fool some of the people some of the time, and not all the people all
yeah,
the
not all the
time.
people all the
So,
time. Yeah.
yeah,
And the other thing too, or similar lines, is you can always go back to a bank and ask to pay a little bit more off, but you can never really go back and say, can I pay a little bit less?
yeah,
If you can't afford, if you're $1 short, that's it. You're cut off. Your funds are gone, and that's the end of you. So,
yeah.
yeah, it sort of gets this whole house of cards that builds up, and then when it collapses, I think at some point it's going to happen. I just don't know when, but you're going to get, and particularly with that third one of the manufacturing, like that's the trifecta where
That's the big one
manufacturing coming out. Yeah,
because
where
manufacturing is a mass sort of what's the word?
the only legit thing they
Manufacturing
really
is heavy industry, so you need a lot of people. It employs a lot of people. So as soon as you lose that, you've got massive unemployment. This is what
and it
happened.
was
That's
a
what
lot,
we went through in the '80s and the '90s when the West deindustrialized. We had a lot of unemployment because we lost a lot of jobs in the
all
West,
the
and they all
jobs
went to China.
overseas.
Where did they go? They went to China. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. So no, I think that triple whammy of the flooding, the manufacturing, the sort of economic collapse that's going on, it might be something where, like, Xi Jinping's got to be concerned. There's got to be a part of it.
yeah,
Like, there's got to be a part of whether, because communism started because of a revolution of the people. Obviously, he's done all his thing to round up all the people who could stand up in opposition to him.
yeah,
So anyone who stands up in opposition, it just depends on how much of the
yeah. I
people
think
go, no.
I was going to say it's going to be interesting to see if the regime like just begins to just kind of more, how would you say, just not shrink, but like, are they going to just, is someone going to in that regime going to stand up, or is there going to be a group that's going to stand up and get rid of Xi Jinping and try to fix things, or are they just going to keep believing the bullshit until the whole country, until one day they wake up and they're like, oh yeah, we've lost such and such part of the country. A bit like the Roman Empire when, what was it, Honorius, what was it, like, some general I think came back and said, I think it was a different situation, but I think that some general came to him and said, oh, we've lost such and such region, and he said, and he thought he was referring to the chicken, his pet chicken, or something like that.
Yeah.
I forget. Maybe
Yeah,
it wasn't that, but it's just like that type of like
yeah.
you bull. Like, is the regime going to bullshit itself so much to the
Bullshit.
point where they've
Well, well, this is the
like the
thing.
rest
Like
of the country's moved on and they're still, you know,
Russia's pretty much done the same thing with Ukraine, where again you've got an authoritarian regime. You've got the Russians sort of telling the Putin, oh yes, our army is glorious, and we have 100,000 men here, and we have these wonderful helicopters and tanks. And Putin's going, great, we're going to use that and invade Ukraine. They use that shit to invade Ukraine and find out none of it works. They haven't actually got half of what they thought they had. And you've got this clusterfuck of, oh shit, we've just overextended ourselves and we've got nowhere near the capability of what we thought we had. So if China, say, makes a move on Taiwan, because that's the only, like, this is where I think Taiwan starts coming into play, because Xi Jinping, if he's going to have, usually if you have a lot of domestic problems, you try and making them external with an external enemy is a really easy way of dealing with that. So turning around and saying, now is the time we're going to move on Taiwan.
And also that's going to unify the country too. Whereas if you don't do that, then you're going to have to put up with, what's going to be interesting. What's going to be interesting is if we see a color revolution or an attempt at a color revolution in China.
CIA-backed revolution.
Yeah. That's going to be interesting to see if the West can pull that off, because I definitely think there would be an attempt to do that, because we've seen it elsewhere: Algeria, Tunisia, Georgia, Ukraine, Belarus.
Totally. Syria. It's like China's sort of in this situation where all you need is some catastrophic event, like the Three Gorges Dam, which I don't know if you've seen some photos online of that for satellite. They got satellite photos of when it was built. The Three Gorges Dam was supposed to last 1,000 years and stop, this sort of 1 in 1,000-year flooding events, that it would handle all these sort of big floods. And then they've gone to, it's kind of only going to stop 1 in 10-year floods. And if you look at the photo, like the original photo when it was constructed, there's a straight line, and then the photo of the dam now is like this crooked dog's leg of a dam. They reckon the thing's about getting pushed and about to shove over. So
it's amazing, because you think like the Chinese built the Great Wall of China, which is still standing today. Like, how did they manage to build that? And yet look where they are today. I mean, it just shows you communism. It's not really, like the Taiwanese make good things. So clearly, it's more in the communist DNA, or not really in the Chinese DNA to a degree.
I think it does go back to the authoritarian, because as I said, if you lie and cheat and bullshit and steal and like, if you leave school, you get a job at the movie cinema, you learn that you lie and you cheat and you bullshit and you steal up to the party officials. The party official comes around and you just lie your tits off. So you're learning how to lie your tits off. You become very, very good at lying your tits off. So then what do you do in your next job? What's the next thing you do? Well, you get a job as a concreter working on this dam. Oh, okay, you got to fill in a timesheet. Well, you're going to tell the truth. Oh, if I lie my tits off, I get away with it. Okay, I'll just lie my tits off. And I think what happens is that permeates through your entire society, where people, just learn to basically lie their tits off from an early age. So now all of a sudden you're an entire country that's built on a sack of lies, where when push comes to shove and you then have serious rainfall, okay, that dam that's supposed to handle it can't handle it. So Beijing are going to be making decisions like, oh, well, we have these wonderful floodways and dams that can handle this water load, so we'll direct it here and we'll direct it there. Whoops, we've just flooded that village. Whoops, we've just flooded that town. Whoops, that dam just exploded. We've just overloaded the dam and now it's just given up. I mean, if the Three Gorges Dam went, like if it failed because of poor construction, like that's something that would, I think it's going to kill millions, or certainly cause a lot of problems for millions. And
might be... Go ahead. Sorry.
I'd say that might be something where people then go, okay, Xi Jinping, he's the problem. He needs to go. That might be the thing.
I think so. I think their response would be like what's happening with the economy right now. Because I read an article. It's like, why is the Communist Party not doing anything to fix the economy? It's because they don't want to. They don't want to. What I read,
I don't think they can. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, they could if they actually opened things up and made doing business easier. Because part of the reason it was said in this Reuters article was the Communist Party doesn't want to lose control of the economy, because in order to fix it, they would have to probably open it up and make things easier, which means less control.
It's like kind of like no, that might be this might be going out a bit of a limb here, but it's kind of like the Biden administration with Hunter Biden, right? So corrupt, dodgy dealings going on. If they come out now and say, oh, yeah, he's corrupt and dodgy dealings, well, then it opens this Pandora's box of, well, what else have you been lying about? And all of a sudden, the 2020 election is on the table and everything gets questioned. I think if China comes out, if the regime comes out and says, okay, this tofu dreg building, this is garbage, we need to fix it. Well, you're admitting that, hang on a minute, we've been building garbage for how long?
Yeah.
And then you would actually, whatever value is left in your construction industry is just going to disappear, because any building now then is, oh, it's all tofu built during the tofu dreg time, so that building must be tofu dreg too. Like, they must all be garbage. It opens up Pandora's box of things getting much worse before they get better, which is why I think regimes and authoritarian leaders, or people in general, just keep lying and bullshitting. It's worked before, we'll keep doing it until, you know, all of a sudden there's somebody with a pitchfork in their front porch.
Yeah. Yeah, and I read in the article that Xi Jinping's response to the whole problem was just, well, all right, people are just going to have to just the new normal. That was basically what he said. And I guarantee you, a billion Chinese are not going to just be like, okay, that's okay, we're happy with that. They're not going to do that.
Well, there is this lie, quit lying down or something, where people are just giving up and lying down, or whatever it is they're doing. I can't remember what it's called now, but there's always this, like, if the Chinese economy just collapses because the manufacturing's leaving and the buildings are collapsing, and so
a lot of unemployed people, and they're not going to just sit around and do nothing. I mean, maybe they will. I don't know.
Even if they do sit around and do nothing, like, that's your economy that's going down the toilet, because your economy is your people, and your people are doing nothing. So you're not building an economy, and you got people who want. It boils down to whether those people can feed themselves or not, really. Because once people start going, I need food, I've got no food. And
China, which can't support itself with food, has to import everything from Australia and elsewhere. Cannibalism. I don't know. I can see that happening.
A huge problem. And although, mind you, that said, how many millions died in the Great Famine, and communism survived. Now, whether that again will be different because you've got smartphones.
I think it's different now because communism was a new thing in China, and I think, I mean, the other thing too was because it was Mao Zedong that was leading. Mao Zedong was kind of seen as a liberator as well. So I think they were kind of okay with it. But now it's like, it's sort of like, it's a bit like the old, how would you say, it's not, how do I put this? It's like, it's the old news. It's the old thing on the block now. People want something new. So I don't think communism is going to age well in China. Let's put it that way.
Well, and then
I don't think Chinese are by nature like communist. I do think there's, well, I mean, there's a sort of like, they can be communal, but
I think women are communist by nature. There we go.
But I mean, historically, China's always been like an empire or a unitarian state. So that's, but
you generally find the political left, communist socialism stuff is very strong. Actually, Jordan Peterson has this thing on this, where the big indicator of whether you are, I think it was whether you would say you'd support communism or something like that, was basically your gender, or your sex, whether you were male or female. Men were overwhelmingly sort of no, and women were like yes. There's an evolutionary background behind that.
The thing I was going to say was just that the Chinese, I think, have shown some innovation throughout history. It's sort of weird, like, that I do think that they would probably eventually wake up and say, well, we don't want this crap. I think Hong Kong would be the first place that would say declare independence. And I think
I was expecting Hong Kong to pop and do something when China made their move and sort of clamped down on it all, and they kind of started, but it didn't really go anywhere. And again,
because Hong Kong doesn't really have its own military. I think Hong Kong is really just
and people had food.
Financial. Go ahead.
I think the big thing is, it boils down to, as long as the people are fed. If you've got food and a shelter, am I going to go revolution? Yeah, maybe tomorrow. I'm not really going to put my life on the line. But if I'm waking up and I've got no food in the house and I can't get food, and my life is literally, how do I get food? The government's fuck this. Well, shit. Like, I think revolution happens. We were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, I think, around France and things. What's really going to be that trigger point? I think that trigger point really is when people go, I don't have food. I don't have, I'm basically at the brink of losing everything. I have nothing left to lose. I may as well grab a spear and a pitchfork and go and get angry and kill some people and go, I've got to direct that anger somewhere. So, and that only happens when you have complete, total economic collapse.
I mean, COVID, we saw a lot of protests. There's a lot of people. A lot of angry people during COVID, but again, people were still getting fed and still, to some degree, functioning in society. So it was sort of like, you know, yeah, the country was breaking, but it didn't break. But I agree with you. I mean, if you have a billion Chinese people and that half of them can't be fed, or even not even half of them, really, if you just have like 10%, probably really,
Really
So
about
I think
10%.
I think that's what
I think
starts
it's 4 or
revolutions. Isn't it
five
like one
percent
percent or
actually for a
10%? Sorry.
revolution. I think it's 4 or
Yeah,
5% who give a shit. Actually, like if 5% of the population of America, which what's America, 300 million,
yeah,
what
350 to
1%,
400 or something
three
like that.
million.
Yeah,
If you had like 12 million people, 15 million people, something like that in America, that's a lot of people, and that's more than the armed forces. Um, and because most people just sort of go back to, again, if you've got food, well, I'm just going to stay out of this because I've got food, and if I just avoid this, they'll sort that out, and I'll survive and get through. I don't want to necessarily join into whatever clusterfuck's going on. And
yeah,
particularly if the government or the regime is seen as out of touch with the people, which I think is happening more and more in
yeah,
America and China. I
yeah,
think it's happened in Russia with Putin, where, as I said, he was out of touch with what his military capability was. And I think once you get that sort of bubble where Beijing's operating on these reports of everything's wonderful, and actually the people are starving and dying in the streets,
yeah,
that disconnect between, again, objective reality versus the bullshit that the elites think is happening, where the elites are out of touch. Once you've got 100 angry farmers looking at the guy on the hill in the nice house with all the food, and they're going, "I've got no food," he has a table full of food.
yeah. That's right.
Right, that house on the hill's getting burnt down, and all the food's getting redistributed. And isn't that what communism is? Redistributing the wealth. So let's go do that. But
Yeah,
no, Xi Jinping's problem is he's got no leader behind him, because he's spent all his time, again, being authoritarian. They're paranoid of other leaders coming along and being better than them. So rather than having a better leader come along and naturally take over, and Xi Jinping just retiring, he's held on to power by getting rid of all his threats. And the problem then is you don't have anybody competent who can solve these problems anymore. Going back to your point, no one wants to make a decision. So it's all
yeah.
falls to Xi Jinping. No one can make a
And there's
decision
no
anyway.
challenging. You can't point out the bad. So how are you going to fix the problem
Yep.
if you can't even point out the bad, or if you
Yep.
point out the bad, you're going to have your head cut off? So it's just
Yeah, I'm not going to go into to the boss's office and tell him that the country's falling apart. You do that. I'm going to tell him it's wonderful and glorious, and Constantine's just making shit up. This
yeah.
is
That's why
a report.
democracy works and democratic republics work, because you have that second voice to say no, this is wrong or this is bullshit or whatever, to keep you in
The
check.
thing with
So
democracy is there's always someone out there saying everything is bullshit, nothing's work, your idea is stupid.
yeah,
And it's then just a matter of how many people agree with that, which is what
yeah,
an election is. And then people either agree with it and, okay, the idea is stupid, and you get somebody else, and maybe it wasn't a stupid idea or not, but either way you move on.
yeah,
And you've got that chance for things to change. Or yes, in theory, and it is really only in theory, someone comes along with a better idea and articulates it and explains it, and that's where how the good ideas get up and the bad ideas go away. Although I'm not sure if it was Churchill or something like that. Democracy is the worst form of government, bar everyone else, bar every other form of government.
yeah.
Yeah, because
It's the
you
least
get that
worst.
cycle. You get that chance where if you've got someone like a Joe Biden who's senile and dementia ridden and has taken apparently a year, a day off for every 3 days he's worked, or whatever it is, the amount of vacation time he's had, and people complain about that
Yeah,
under Trump. And then someone like Trump saying everything's fucked and the border's out of control and all that, well, then people will gravitate towards that leader, because, yeah, well, if I'm being impacted by this and seeing that, then that's what you get. Whereas in China, yeah, there is not. If you come out and you say, China is falling apart and the floods and everything is bad and manufacturing's leaving, we need to fix it, you get disappeared. And so everyone's just like, oh, okay, right. Well, we're not going to say anything about that or do anything about it. And it's only going to be when the people run out of food,
yeah,
where, okay, I don't care anymore. I don't care if I die, because I'm going to die anyway. I haven't got enough food. May as well go loot, steal, kill some people, whatever. Overthrow the government. Why not?
yeah.
And if you've got another couple of thousand villagers who join in on you, there's your revolution.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a comparison to this in history, in Chinese history, because I do know that China's gone through several phases of authoritarian
Every
empires
has.
to breaking up. There was the Warring States period, where China was divided among three kingdoms, I think, or three different
Yeah,
political regimes. and then it was consolidated again, then broke up again, and so on and so forth. So I wonder what caused the initial sort of breakdown of the first empire. So maybe it was this. It'd be interesting to find out. I'll have to look that up.
It probably is always food, because I know the French Revolution, it was that, let them eat cake. It was something about the price of bread was too high, but cake was still I don't know. I've got to look that up.
No, it's true. Yeah, it was either I think that, or there wasn't enough bread or something. So
I've got to look.
The funny thing was, people think Marie Antoinette said that in the sort of like shitty. She meant to kind of insult the peasants. She didn't. But apparently, I've heard that actually, no, she actually just wasn't. She kind of said that like, well, why don't they just eat cake? Like, it's just kind of
said to have been spoken in the 18th century by a great princess upon being told that the peasants had no bread. It's like, all right, let them eat cake.
Yeah. Why not? We've got cake. They can eat cake.
Yeah.
But I was seen as, but I have no doubt that it was twisted to give fire to the revolution. So
I think it still goes back to that point, though, that obviously food was a problem. And you look at the thing, like America, people are being concerned about food, although partly of that, some of their supermarkets being closed in like certain areas of Democrat-run states, that because of the break-ins and the theft. But if you had that sort of thing in China, where you've got a couple of million people who, you've just had a flood, you've got people who've just lost loved ones. The government's out there saying everything's fine, nobody died. And it's like, but for a fact that you've lost your whole family and the government doesn't give a shit about. That makes people angry. And if they haven't got food on top of that, I don't know. I just feel it's coming. I feel like the whole world just seems to be spiraling down this sort of madness, where the leaders are more and more, the elite are more and more out of touch.
Yeah, I think everybody talks about World War III, but I don't think it's World War III. I think there's just going to be this massive revolution in a lot of countries like China and the U.S. where you're going to see
recession.
Yeah, you're going to see recession or secession. That's what you're going to see. It's not going to be China fighting the U.S. It will be more like, revolutionaries in China, revolutionaries in America wanting to break away from the corrupt government. And who's going to come out on top in Asia? It'll be India. India's going to come out better for this in the long run. You watch. India will be the next. Huh?
As long as India can keep feeding themselves.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah. So, and I think they're doing a good job, sort of not taking sides in anything, and they're being a real dark horse. I think they're geopolitically. I think they're playing their cards right now. So, yeah.
We wrap it up there.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up there. So we'll catch up with everyone next week. I think we'll think about the topic before we announce it next week. So. Cool. All right. On behalf of Talking Shit,
this is Martin.
Martin. Yeah. See you guys next week.